Hi everyone, hope you're safe and doing great. In the previous videos we talked about the Speedball B and A series, and last but not least we will talk about the Speedball C series. Let's get into it. Here we have the Speedball C series. This is a traditional broad edge nib, but with a couple of key features that makes it unique. It has a long tip and has two cuts that splits the tip in 3 foils. These features allow Speedball nibs a greater degree of flexibility that gives you a lot of freedom when writing. One of the most frequent questions that people ask is why my nib is not working. There is not just one answer, it may depend on several different things. When the nib is new, the ink may have some trouble to get a grip on the surface. You can clean it with a bit of alcohol and a piece of paper or an old cloth, or with some dish soap and an old toothbrush. You can also use a little flame. Insert the nib in the holder first, then pass the point quickly through the flame a couple of times. Let it cool, and if necessary, clean every leftover with a piece of paper. Be very careful to not burn yourself. Eventually, with time and use, the ink will flow correctly. It can depend also on how much confidence we have with these instruments, how much we feel that the nib is working right on the surface, if we are keeping the right slant of the nib in regard to the paper. Sometimes can be the paper itself, or the ink, if it's too thick, can be a factor too. Mastering all of this takes time and practice, but eventually you will get there. As for loading the nib, I suggest you to use a brush. Dip the brush first, then slide it by the side of the reservoir. If we dip it directly into the bottle, some ink will remain on the final part of the nib, and this will affect the quality of the stroke when we place the nib into the paper. Do not load the nib too much, about half the reservoir will do it. If we load it too much, we won't have control of the flow of the ink, especially if we use calligraphic inks, of which we cannot control the density. If we rotate the nib on the side, sometimes the foil can get stuck on one another. This can be a problem if we have a loaded nib, because the foil can snap and splatter ink on the page. If this happens, just stop writing and reposition the foils correctly with an old cloth or a piece of paper. If the foils get stuck often, one solution may be take a piece of very fine sandpaper and pass it through every foil so we can remove some friction between them. If you feel that the nib slipped too much on the paper and it does not have a good friction, take a piece of fine sandpaper and gently slide it on the surface. Do not apply too much pressure, just a little to give it some more grip. On new nibs, sometimes the edges can be too sharp and get stuck on the paper and compromise a good flow of the nib in the writing surface. To overcome this, just take a small piece of fine sandpaper and gently slide the corners of the nib into it to smoothen them. Well guys, this is it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you have some feedback or thoughts about this nib, remember to write it down in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, stay safe and keep writing.